Welcome to episode 149 of the Confidence Through Health podcast. In this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Donny Makower of Radical Foods, and that's spelled RDCL Foods, about superfoods. What are superfoods? It's a buzzword that's been around for several years, and some of those foods you're familiar with, and some of them you might not be. Most of them are plant-based because they're getting their nutrients from the soil and the sun, but we talk about where do you find superfoods? We talk about why it's important to use superfoods. And we talk about his passion and where it came from, because he's not a traditional beverage or food person with a lot of background in that area. But he decided with a partner in research, in some research guys, to come out with these products because it's a twist on traditional products that we've had in the beverage world that are potentially chemically infused or just too sugary. It's just not good for us. And they twisted it around and made it to where it tastes very similar. And so it soothes that piece of what we are looking for in the products, but also gives us the nutrition that we need by providing those superfoods that may not be available to us in our local area. In a way that we can still get the nutrients from those without them going bad, without losing, the source of nutrient that we need for ourselves to be able to live a nice, healthy, and long life. And so it's exciting. It's exciting to see what they're doing and how they're shaking up the beverage space right now, and soon to be, as he talks about, into the food space. So I'm excited about this. I think you're going to learn a lot about it, because superfoods, while it is a buzzword, they are very important to your overall health and your longevity. All right. So welcome, Donnie, to the Confidence Through Health podcast.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here.
So you started an organization or a business called Radical Superfoods. And so I wanted to have you on to talk about superfoods. I wrote about this in my first book, which was the inspiration for the podcast. They're both called Confidence Through Health. But,
Yep.
As a health guy who just sort of gets into the coaching piece of it, I get a lot of people are like, okay, superfoods, are they really, is it a marketing gimmick? Is it really is it just a trend? But first off, you obviously got into it for a reason. Why did you get into wanting to get into the superfood business? And as we get into that, explain what superfoods are.
Yeah. So, okay, that's a good place to start. And I'll take a half step back leading into what is a superfood and how do you even define that word? Because that is something we've had a lot of internal conversation about, of what is or isn't a superfood.
Right.
But what got me into it, I actually used to be in the marketing and advertising and branding space, so I do not have an extensive background in the food and beverage world.
Right.
But I became really passionate about the power of nutrition to kind of heal and nourish the body, and what the right foods can actually do for you. Back a number of years ago, when my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer, and although she had surgery to remove it, it had spread to other parts of her body, the lymph nodes under her arms, to her spine. And it was caught at an early stage, but she went to a wellness center that sort of put her on a plant-based protocol, one that's very nutrient rich, removes sugar and junk as well, right? And tries to give you other healthy lifestyle habits, but it's largely centered around what you're eating, what you're consuming. And so, she would have wheatgrass juice and organic sprouts and lots of greens, and, so it's really quite healthy. And sure enough, she halted and reversed the progression of her cancer. Now, it is an anecdote, right? So I always tread carefully there, but with my sister in particular, that protocol really worked wonders for her and changed her life. And it's what first introduced me to the power of food. And so I became very focused on how do you optimize the human condition, so to speak. And as I learned more, I became more and more in favor of plant-based living. That was the protocol she was on. It was 100% plants. All animal products were completely removed because of detrimental health impacts from eating those foods. I realize, especially in the age that we're living in now, that is a topic that is hotly debated by people. Right?
Yes,
so I will acknowledge that, right? Yeah. But I started looking myself at the evidence, and it seemed quite heavily weighted in favor of plant-based living. And so I became predominantly plant-based first. And then I became entirely vegan after that. The difference being plant-based is a diet.
Right.
I gave myself outs here and there. But once I learned about what was happening to the animals that we exploit in the supply chain, I went from being predominantly plant-based to 100% vegan, where I just really want to leave the animals alone and not support unnecessary cruelty. And then in that context, after I left the marketing and advertising space at an agency, and we sold that agency, and I stepped out of that world to co-found with a partner Radical Superfoods. And the idea was, how do we get people to eat more plants? Right. Well, if we make foods that are already popular, like hot chocolate, for example, but make a really healthy plant-powered version of it where people can still enjoy the food, but now get all these other health benefits. That's how I sort of worked my way into this world. Right.
So, with your sister, and you said several things that I think really people need to look at, in not just as in a, like you said, an anecdotal, because I know that there's more than just your sister that's happened to, like that it radically changed their diet from the standard American diet of fast food and heavy protein meats and lots of cow's milk, and the stuff that we sort of were told was, hey, this is the way we're supposed to live, back in the 70s and 80s, and it was the agenda of this is what's going to be put out in the food supply chain, to now we're starting to see, oh, those things are actually causing problems. In that, if we, not all the time, if we go away from it, is it going to completely reverse the diseases that we've got? But a lot of times it does. And when you mix in those superfoods that are the foods that are really the it's not just that they've got more nutrition, it's the different types of nutrition that they've got, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it even actually starts to dovetail into your original question of what constitutes a superfood. Right. The way we break it down is, some of the ingredients we use for their nutritional value, and others we use for their functional value, and either to us can qualify as a superfood. Right. So when we have super cocoa and we make a hot chocolate that's very nutrient rich, I mean, our hot chocolate has kale, broccoli, and spinach in it. Right. You don't taste it. It just tastes like hot chocolate, but it's in there. And I don't think that most people would question the nutritional value of some of these deep green vegetables and all of the sort of phytonutrients that they contain and the benefits to the body. But then there's other ingredients that we could use, such as like magnesium or L-theanine or rhodiola, or these functional ingredients that can also benefit the body in different ways for different needs that people have around mood, sleep, digestion, stress, energy, all of these kinds of things. And so we combine these different types of ingredients for either nutritional or functional benefits, and that is the at least the initial filter for what would qualify as a superfood to us.
Right. So it's basically like taking the hot chocolate that you could get off the shelf and infusing a bunch of vitamins to it, and minerals and other things that your body can actually use, versus the marshmallows.
Yeah, there's even more to it than that. And part of it is vitamins and minerals. But when we add like actual fruit or vegetables or things like chia seeds, or, it goes beyond just vitamins and minerals, because there are other benefits as well. But if we only added those things, that would be really great. But the other side of it is that we strip out the junk. So if we just took a off-the-shelf hot chocolate and added those things, great. But what about all that sugar that's in there? And what about artificial flavors? So we also remove the garbage and then add in the good stuff. And then you end up with a product that you don't have to feel bad when you have it. Right. You really feel good.
Well, and that's almost exactly what I remember. I gave a speech for a Chamber of Commerce a couple of years ago on health and how if you change your health from a nutrition standpoint, your productivity is going to get better. Because you're going to sleep better, you're going to feel better, your brain's going to work better, all the functions, and so your productivity is just normally going to get better. And I remember one of the things I said that struck with somebody, came up to me afterwards, and he's like, "Everybody says eat more of the good stuff, but you're the first person I've heard say, but you also can't eat the bad stuff." Like it's not just to eat more of the good stuff so you can eat more of the bad stuff. No, you've got to strip it out.
Yeah, you want to minimize the bad and maximize the good as much as possible. It's very hard to eat a perfect diet, and there's no question.
Sure.
I have my moments of indulgence,
Sure.
but I try to maximize whole plant foods wherever possible. And even if I'm buying a food, like if you look at to reference Super Cocoa again, right? A superfood hot chocolate. It's technically processed. Once you take a bunch of ingredients and turn it into a powder, it's processed. But I know where it comes from. I mean, you're talking about, when I say there's kale in the hot chocolate, literally there was organic kale growing out of the ground. It was picked at its peak ripeness, flash frozen, and then freeze dried and ultimately turned into a powder. And that's what's in the product.
Right.
So it is technically processed. I know that it's derived from whole plant foods. So you want to just stay as close to ingredients that you understand what they are, and that they give you good benefits, and try to minimize the stuff that's not so good for you. And then you're quite ahead of the game if you could do that. So
you brought up a good thing I want to make sure that people understand is when you're looking at foods that are processed, and like you said, it's not necessarily processed like you would think, like maybe a chicken nugget is processed, right? Like
that's right. It's different.
That's going through a completely different change of molecular construction and everything. But what you're doing, so how important is it in that processing piece of, is it organic? Is it non-organic? Is it, like you said, flash frozen at the peak of ripeness, or is it ripened on the traveling, to get to the plant? Because there's obviously things that are happening there chemically wise that aren't good for us, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, you want to be eating fresh fruits and vegetables, for example, as close to the time that they're picked as possible. I mean, they do start to degrade over time once they're picked out of the ground or off a tree, or whatever the case may be. I do believe that it's beneficial to eat organic. I don't know that. Or my understanding is that there's no additional nutritional value, right? If you have an organic apple versus a non-organic apple,
right? My
understanding is it's an apple either way. But why wouldn't you want the organic one? Because what you're not getting is additional nutrition. What you're getting there is you're getting it without the pesticides and the additional chemicals. Like, why would you want to consume that? So yes, organic foods are more expensive, typically. But if you can get them, really, you're removing a lot of chemicals that would otherwise be in the food that are probably not ideal for human health and consumption. Right. And so that's why we tend to be proponents of organic ingredients. So if you look at the back label, you will just see the word organic over and over again, because we do tend to lean into organic ingredients wherever possible.
And so do you find that's, you mentioned it's more expensive. Do you find it's harder to find that as a source, when you're looking to get those products into then, as you said, process to make your cocoa? Like, are you finding that as an issue?
No, there's enough of it now. It's so common. Now, is it harder to find? I guess theoretically it's harder. There's still more conventionally grown produce, for example, than there is organic. But I wouldn't say it's hard to find. You're paying a bit of a premium. I think it's well worth it. You're getting better quality. So, I think the trade-off benefits are significant. So I tend to eat, even just at home, in the foods that I eat, we lean quite heavily into the organic space. Yeah.
Well, and in my argument always is, and I'm reading Super Life by Darren Olean right now, and and it's funny how it correlates with what I've said for forever. But like, people always tell me, oh, but it's so expensive to eat healthy. I'm like, yeah, but if you put the chemicals in your body, at some point they're going to come out, right? Whether it's going to be coming out in a disease or shortening your life, or or that you're going to have to take all these pills to come. Like, the expense is going to be there. It's just, do you want the expense up front where you know what you're getting, or it's going to come later and it's going to shock you and disrupt your life?
Yeah, you're paying for it one way or another. Right. And the difference in price is not always so significant, too. I'm finding that, sometimes I'm in the store and I'm looking and I'm like, oh, it's not that much more for the organic version. So I think I always encourage people to do that wherever possible. I think it's worth it.
So why did you get into the food space? Like, thinking like, okay, I want to help people and your sister and all that, but like it's very competitive.
It's
So
super
how much of
competitive.
that was like, oh, is this really what we need to be doing, or is there a different option?
Yeah, well, the idea was, how do I get people to eat more plants, right?
Right.
How do you, and a lot of this, if I again take a slight step back, a big motivator for me, part of it was health. How do you get people to eat plants because they're healthy,
Right.
and incorporate more plants into their daily routine? Build healthy habits, right, around
Right.
plants. That's a core pillar to what we're doing, and even my own personal motivations. But a lot of it is, how do we minimize the exploitation of animals?
Right.
I cannot believe what we do to animals, and most people don't think about it, don't give it any consideration. Right. And 99% of people would say that they love animals. If you ask them, do you love animals? Of course I love animals.
Sure.
Right? Would you want to be cruel to an animal? No, of course not. I would stand up against animal cruelty.
Right.
And yet 99.9% of consumers are paying people to be cruel to animals on an absolutely daily basis. And people justify it for one reason or another. Oh, well, this is where I get my protein. Yeah, but you don't need to get protein from animals. You get lots of bad stuff too. But it's necessary. It's not necessary. You can absolutely live a plant-based lifestyle, and I would argue you'd be healthier. So none of this is required. None of it. Maybe it was at certain points in human history where we said, listen, we needed to eat animals to survive. That is not the case now. It is just completely unnecessary. We're hurting the planet. We're hurting our health. And we're hurting the animals. But I've looked into the eyes of an animal before it's been slaughtered. I know how animals suffer. I don't care how nicely you think your supplier is doing it. I don't care if it's humanely raised or cage-free. These animals are all ultimately killed against their will at a very young age. It is horrible. We just don't need to do this. That was a really big motivator for me, is to try to get people to eat more plants, because if you're eating more plants, perhaps you're displacing items that would have been in your daily routine otherwise, that not, like cocoa, for example. A lot of hot chocolates and cold chocolate drinks are dairy. Right. By using ours, yes, you get the health benefits, but I'm also potentially displacing something that was animal based in your daily routine. And that was a big driver for me. Right.
How much pushback have you seen? Because like you said, there's a lot of people that are on the other side of it still.
Yeah.
And so like how difficult is it for you to, like, you sent me samples, and I'll be honest, like it was amazing. Like I'm not really just saying that because you're on it. Like it was like, there's no way you can tell the difference. And it actually, I think it's better than the typical that you buy off the shelf, from a richness standpoint. And so like, how much of an issue are you facing when you're trying to get it into whether a store or just convincing people that, like, no, you really need to try the plant-based side of things versus the tried and true old school way of it?
Look, we're still an early stage company. We're a small team, just kind of slowly putting one foot in front of the other. So sometimes people are a little skeptical. By the same token, I think people are particularly interested because it's a unique product. Right. When we take a product that's popular and we flip it on its head and have a very unique ingredient story and a different take on it, I think people are intrigued because they want to bring the best products to their consumers. They want to bring good variety. But still, you're always battling the status quo. You're battling whatever's there now. So part of it is, if you want to be in a physical store, you're battling for shelf space. But we're also a predominantly online company where we want people to visit our site, learn about the product, give it a try, order it, let us know what you think. But the feedback's been really, really positive. Thankfully, people are loving the product and getting a lot out of it and feeling good having it.
Right. And so with the superfood, like, from whether it was you testing it or just what when you're researching to go through and like, okay, are we going to add this in? Are we going to add that in? Like, why is the benefit of having these different foods in? Like, if somebody's never experienced, any kind of superfoods on the more, I don't want to say out there, but like, obviously blueberries are superfoods and there's things like that where I would think most people that are, say, 30 or 40 have had blueberries in their life.
I would think
some of the other things that are out there that are like, okay, this is not just at my local grocery store. Um, when somebody is experimenting and expanding their diet into those areas, like how much should they expect to notice from like, oh, I'm changing from this to this, and I'm doing it for maybe the ethical reasons or because I'm trying to change my health. But when am I going to notice that I actually feel a difference?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I think it depends on the product. So if you look, so I have these here next to me. So this is Super Cocoa, right? This is our box, and you can make it hot or cold. And you're talking about, again, like I'd mentioned before, you have pea protein and you have greens and veggies and superfruit and ancient grains and seeds, but there's no gluten. So if you have this, I think you're going to feel really good. It's not going to give you an upset stomach. It's not going to give you any ill effects. I just think it's a delicious drink that's healthy for you. Are you going to start drinking that and all of a sudden feel like a superhero? I wouldn't think so. I think you'll feel good, but I don't think it's going to be like, wow, I have taken it and I am directly noticing this like specific benefit. Maybe not. You just know that you're eating something that's particularly healthy. However, if you take a product like this, like I have another one of our products, this is called Radical Elements. This is a hydration product, right? It's powder. You add it to water, you shake it up, and it tastes great, but it also gives you these functional benefits. So this has like organic coconut water for added hydration. This has a focused energy blend where it has caffeine from organic guarana, it has rhodiola, it has L-theanine from organic green tea. You know, when you start taking ingredients that are more functional, you're going to feel that pretty quickly. You're going to drink this, and within 30 minutes, 40 minutes, you should start to feel like an elevated state, potentially elevated mood, a bit more energy. You know, there's some really nice benefits. We have one that's calming too, right? That kind of can take the edge off. It gives you a little chill effect because it also has L-theanine, but it has this bioavailable magnesium from seawater that's just, it's calming, right? And so I think functional benefits you tend to feel more readily than something that's just power packed that I think over time you see a benefit, but you're not going to be like, oh my God, an hour later you somehow feel totally different. Yeah, that's probably the fair assessment.
Okay. So you mentioned L-theanine several times, and I have a personal like connection there because my son, which I've mentioned multiple times on the podcast before, but my son has been diagnosed with ADHD, and L-theanine was one of the things that I researched, and I'm like, okay, this is going to help stabilize like his brain, basically in layman's terms, like stabilize his brain so that he doesn't have those big swings. And so it's very noticeable because during the school year, we're very regimented about, okay, take it. And he doesn't like it. He's an 11-year-old boy. He just wants to be and so in the summertime, we relax a little bit. He doesn't take it when he goes to the grandparents or, things like that. We're like, okay, just relax and just have fun, be a boy. Noticeable difference. And like the way he acts and his swings. And so having that in there, I mean, I'm going to applaud you for it because I think that's a huge thing that most people don't realize. Not just that particular piece of it, but how much what we're not getting when we're drinking sodas or just coffee or coffee with dairy creamers, how much we're not getting that's actually helping our brain and we're actually damaging the brain as far as connections and how things are working.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, look, I love L-theanine as an ingredient. I'm glad you found it for your son and that it's had an impact. And the interesting thing is then this kind of goes to a question that you had earlier of, a lot of people may have never heard of L-theanine. Right. It's in green tea. I mean, you can get it. Ours is actually derived from organic green tea, the one that we use. But on our site, when you go to a product page, we actually list every ingredient and what it is, like what its benefit is, why we use it. And we even link to like a third party site that has nothing to do with us. It could be a WebMD or it could be a study or whatever, is helpful that kind of further describes that ingredient and its uses and benefits. And so I think there's a lot for people to discover, like L-theanine for your son, that can change their life in many cases. For me, I'll tell you, by the way, from a nutritional standpoint, when I talked about, you're not going to have super cocoa and an hour later feel different. Again, I think you'll feel good. It's just not going to, it's different than a functional beverage. Right. But I will say that for many, many years of my life, I had pretty bad eczema. Well,
Okay.
I mean, I had it around my eyes. I had it on my hands, my wrists, my arms. I mean, years, right?
Mhm.
Red, flaky, kind of itchy skin. And I would go and see dermatologists and often just get cortisone creams to put on
Right.
it.
Yep.
This is really symptom management. It's not getting to the root of what's causing it. And I asked doctors for years, is there anything that I can do from a diet standpoint, things I should add into my diet or take out of my diet that might impact my skin? And really, by and large, the answer has been no. This is just who you are. You're as tall as you are. You have the eye color that you have. You have other attributes, and this just happens to be one of your attributes, unfortunately, right? And when I became plant-based, it just over time, my eczema just went away.
Yeah.
It just disappeared. So that is a very significant benefit. Again, can I say that will happen to every person? I mean, I'm not sure, but it happened to me. It happened to me. And this is something, again, I wrestled with for decades.
Yeah.
So I've definitely felt significant benefits, not to mention some weight loss and just trimming down and feeling better overall.
Right.
A lot of benefits there, but you don't get those in an hour.
Right.
You get those over time.
That's over time. But it's, but that's the thing, that it's nice to have your focus being on the plant-based solutions, in the beverage space, because like you said, some things are going to be more of a immediate impact, right? You're going to feel it because it's going to get in your bloodstream and it's going to go to where it needs to go. And especially if it's something that's going to affect the brain, you're going to feel it more immediately. But to still be able to say, okay, this is a plant-based thing that I'm going to be able to, soothe my indulgence, if you will, for chocolate.
That's right.
Especially in the wintertime, and to be able to give your kids something is like, oh, everybody's got hot chocolate or everybody's got this or that. And you're like, okay, well, here's the healthy version. You're not necessarily looking for the immediate impact, but it's definitely not going to hurt you long-term.
It's not going to hurt you. And you know what, just as we're talking about this, there is an immediate impact that I didn't mention earlier. And a lot of people use super cocoa in this way. So when you look, each serving has 80 calories, 6 grams of protein. It's almost like a little mini meal. And so the way many people use it is almost like a bridge between lunch and dinner. So you lunch at noon or 1 o'clock. You're not eating dinner till 6 or 7, but now it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you're hungry and you want something. And sometimes you want something cold. Sometimes you want something warm. You could make it either way, but you're having this and it's almost literally like having a mini meal that's just fully plant powered, full of nutrients. It does have some protein and it's a little bit satiating. So it can actually carry you between meals. That is a benefit that you feel right away.
Yeah. Well, and that's when you add protein into it, I think that's the piece that like a lot of people are stuck on right now with protein, and it's a big buzzword. And where are you getting your protein, and are you getting enough protein, and all those things. But I think people don't realize is that you can get plenty of protein from plant-based sources. Yeah. And if you're looking at it in the way that you look at it, in that like, okay, well, I'm going to make this, well, I might as well throw a little protein in there because it's plant-based and it's going to be good for you. And it's going to, whether it's interacting with the other things in there, it's helping the other things from a nutrition standpoint. Like and I know that's part of what the formulation of everything is like, okay, how do I make this taste good, but also be something that's going to be, like you said, that's going to hold you over and not just make you go, okay, now that I had that, I need to go get the Three Musketeers or the whatever bar because I'm still hungry. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is too, when you're eating whole plants, you can eat quite a lot of them. Right. You can just eat as much as you want. I mean, again, once you start getting into other kinds of foods, even that are quote unquote vegan, there's plenty of vegan junk food.
Oh, yeah.
There's junk food that's not vegan and there's junk food that is vegan. So I'm not suggesting that just by virtue of being vegan, you're healthy. Right. You still want to avoid garbage. Right. Yeah. As much wherever you can. But it can be quite satisfying. And you don't need to get protein from animals, despite popular belief. You can get all the protein you need. And by the way, there's plenty of vegan bodybuilders and powerlifters. Doing quite well. You could find them easily in the social media space, but it immediately dispels the myth around this, I think, quite effectively.
No, I agree. So what, and there might not be, but I'm assuming you've got some stuff in the works as far as like new products coming in, like Are you sticking in the beverage, or are you going to go out into other areas of the food,
No, we're exploring other areas. Some
Yeah.
of them are quite unique that we'll just share when we launch them, but I'll share
Right.
one with you that we have a pretty unique take on oatmeal that we're working on.
Oh, cool.
So that's not a beverage, right?
Right. Right.
Beverage-y because you're adding your liquid to it, but
Right.
it's meal. But yeah, so we have some things in the works that we think are pretty unique and will taste great and will be really good for you.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
there's a little teaser of some of the things of what we're working on.
But that's another big space. And one of the things you mentioned, and I don't know if it's all the products, but you mentioned that the cocoa was gluten free.
Yeah, it's gluten free. Yeah, all our products are gluten free, and I think we're aiming to stick that way.
Okay, so I was going to ask, is that something that you're purposefully looking at for a reason, or is it just more because of the organic piece of it? And a lot of times things that have gluten in them have to be processed down to where we can actually use them in some other product.
Yeah, no, it's certainly not for an organic versus non-organic reason. It's just that a lot of people avoid gluten or have a gluten sensitivity. And obviously there's a small percentage of people who are celiac and just can't have gluten. Right. And so I think where we can avoid it, we prefer to, because it just increases our compatibility with a wider range of people.
Right.
And now if we were to create a product that was just literally, you could not get around gluten, then we would consider it. We're not necessarily committing to we'll never have a gluten product, but that's actually an aim. I mean, I can't think of a product that's in our pipeline at the moment that would somehow require gluten. So we're going to strive to be gluten free wherever we can, and so far that's looking pretty likely across the board.
Yeah, well, that's great because from a health perspective, I think it is the better way to go.
You don't need it.
You don't, and it's
need gluten.
And I think that one of the things that I mentioned this on when I was talking to a doctor the other day, that we have this mindset that when you look in the past of hundreds of years ago or whatever, that people go, oh well, we were hunter gatherers, and so and you sort of mentioned, well, maybe we don't have to be that anymore. But I think the perception needs to be switched, because we were really gatherers, hunters.
Yeah.
Because, most of them weren't successful every time they went hunting. And you didn't go hunting every day. You hunted once a week, or once it wasn't this constant just drive to hunt. It was more of a constant, I'm going to pick berries and pick fruits and pick roots and pick, and that's what you see when you go to tribes in Africa that are still not technically developed or technologically developed. They go out, they hunt, yes, but they are constantly, people are like flabbergasted at wait, you can eat that root, or you can eat that, and you don't see obesity, you don't see the diseases that we have here.
That's right. Yeah, our bodies appear to be much more anatomically sort of compatible with eating plants. Mm-hmm. Right. If you look at our teeth, if you look at the fact that our jaws move side to side, if you look at the size of our intestines and stomach and our various attributes, even our hands, we don't have claws. We don't, we just really do resemble other herbivores, not omnivores and not carnivores. Right. And so, yeah, you're not eating a bunch of plants and getting heart disease and diabetes and, the common killers. This is just not happening. The hospitals are not full of people who are plant eaters. It's just, obviously there's no 100% silver bullet that will protect you from anything, but just you're trying to increase your odds here in the game of life. And, it seems like eating a plant-based diet will really give you an edge there. But again, I understand it. I watch a lot of the other side. Mm-hmm. I watch what people say who are carnivore eaters and keto. And, it's just, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nutritionist, but I know how to read. I know how to listen to people. I know how to I can consume content like the best of them. Right. And so it just, from where I sit, the predominance of the evidence is in support of plant-based living. There's just inordinate amounts of it. And a really great resource is nutritionfacts.org, because they showcase studies, and again, it's all evidence-based nutrition. So you can get people poking fun at the other side or telling people they're ridiculous, and you can get spun up into what to me feels like a lot of propaganda and just garbage. But really, just what does the science say, and follow that. And if you could be driven a bit by an ethical position, that let's try to leave animals alone wherever we can, which I think is pretty much everywhere. I don't think we need to exploit animals in this modern era. I'd really like to see that happen.
Well, and your point that you can read, I think that stretches to more than just like digging up your own, taking your own time to dig up, okay, what is this person saying about it? What is this research saying about it? But more like also when you're in the grocery store and you pull something off the shelf, or you don't even have to pull it off the shelf, because you could just look it up on your phone. You could look up the nutrition facts, right?
Absolutely.
So take Radical's nutrition facts of their Super Cocoa and go grab the leading hot chocolate product off the shelf. And which one can you read every word on the ingredient list?
Exactly. Yeah. Which one you just know, you intrinsically know that one's good for you and one's not. People are familiar enough with these common ingredients to see, there's still a lack of broad-based education out there on really the health benefits or detriments of different foods and ingredients. But I think people largely can tell the difference between good for you and bad for you. But it is a confusing time, though, because there is so much competing information out there, and there's a lot of misinformation. And I think a big part of the problem is there's not enough good faith discussion with people representing both sides of the argument. There's a lot of making fun. Oh, look how ridiculous, there's a bunch of vegans who are doing this thing. They're activists. They're crazy. And it's like, I think it's very easy to belittle something and, twist the motivation into something that it's not. And I think it's easy to do it on the other side too. But my argument is this. Look, I think I can take a very good faith position and provide all the evidence in the world to show you that you can absolutely live a fully healthy, thriving life being entirely plant-based. And let's say that you get someone who says, but I could show you that you could live a life eating plants and animal products together, and that they'll have some other set of evidence that they show. Well, my conversation is, all I need you to do is acknowledge that you could be perfectly healthy and thrive on plants alone. Because even if it's true, I'm not saying it is true, but let's pretend that it's true that you could eat animals as well and also be healthy. But as long as you acknowledge that you could also do that on only plants, then why not leave the animals alone? Because there is a third-party victim here that's innocent in all of this. So even if it was neutral, which again, I don't believe it is neutral. I believe a plant-based diet is superior. But even if it was neutral, let's give the animals a chance to live a pain-free, cruelty-free life. And so that to me is why the animal component to this is so significant.
So what, well, I want to make sure that I give people a chance to find you and follow you and all of that stuff. So, so how would they go about, what's the best way to, obviously your website, but what's the best way to follow the new things that are coming out?
Yeah. So I would say to follow us most actively, I would encourage, we are on multiple social platforms, but Instagram is always a good place to start. And it's Radical Superfoods, RDCL Superfoods, right? Of course, we spell radical without vowels, right? That seems to be a bit of a trend now. So RDCL Superfoods, you can find us on Instagram. You can find me personally on LinkedIn, right? I'm not super active on Facebook and the various social platforms. We do that through the company. On LinkedIn, you could find me, Donny Makower. And certainly our website, radicalsuperfoods.com. And again, right now we just have the 3 products in market that we had been testing and have been received really well. And we have others in development, and just keep pushing forward. And I appreciate conversations like this.
So why did you take the vowels out?
So it's interesting. Yeah. Why did we take the vowels out?
Yeah.
So there are two versions of the word radical. One, radical, like get radical, live radically, right? Do things that are different, go beyond. Like there was a lot that we liked about the word radical in a positive way. I know sometimes people use the word radical in a negative connotations, right? Sure. But we really liked the positive aspects of living a radical life, right?
Yeah.
Get radically healthy. But a radical, radicle, is actually that initial seed of a plant that germinates and sprouts and like.
Oh, wow.
And so it's a radical.
Okay.
Right. And so we really liked, because we're plants, we liked that there are two versions of the word radical. And when you strip the vowels out, the common letters across both versions of the word radical is RDCL.
Right.
And so we just went with RDCL, Radical Superfoods, in that way. It kind of encapsulates both versions.
Right. Right. That's cool. That's cool. Well, yeah, I greatly appreciate the conversation. I think it's been great.
Likewise.
And I am going to put all the links in the show notes so that people can be able to connect with what's going on. And like I said, I've tried the hot cocoa and like the super cocoa, and like I highly recommend it to my listeners.
Oh, I really appreciate that. We'll have to get you to try the other guys here.
Yeah.
And by the way, one way that I've been using these, because sometimes people find unique ways to use the products.
Right.
I actually use a half. So we have a scooper in there, and you just put a scoop in water, right? I've been using a half scoop in my tea. So I make like, let's say in the morning, and then I add this, and I'm essentially turning my tea into like a superfood tea by just adding this to it, and it doubles as a sweetener. There's no added sugar in there, but it's sweet, and it just kind of elevates the tea. So there's a lot of uses for these products, and people are getting creative in terms of what they figure out. So it's fun to watch.
Well, and I think that's a neat and a good important piece to add, because like you said earlier, like there's a lot of people that'll like try something or like, oh, it tastes too green or tastes too grassy or it tastes too, and it's like, okay, well, just add it to something else that's still a healthy, like we're not trying to add it to something that's unhealthy. Again, we're like, but if you got something else that's healthy that you like the taste of, add a little bit. You don't have to add the whole thing. Just add a little bit and just see if it can blend in. And then you're getting the taste that you like from the original product. And then you're adding the superfood. And so you're getting the benefits of the nutrition.
Exactly. And to me, that's the way to go. And it's all very enjoyable too. It's, you're not sacrificing taste and experience to get something healthy. So we'd like you to have it all and, not lose any of the things that you love about eating and drinking.
Right.
So, and by the way, if people go to our site, you could put in an email address and it'll give you a discount code, and, people can get a discount off an order. So hopefully people will give it a shot. Love to hear what everyone thinks.
Well, thank you so much, Donnie.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, Jerry. Great chatting with you.